When you borrow an element from a workset, your name is listed in the workset's dialog box as the borrower. Your name also displays on the Properties palette in the Edited By parameter dialog box. The simplest way to borrow an element is to make a change to that element. If the workset to which the element belongs is not owned by another user, you automatically become the borrower of the element and can make changes. In this example, we're going to borrow an element which is already assigned to a workset. Selecting the front wall of the building, you will see you get a new icon that shows the Make Element Editable. You can also right-click the element, and this option will also be available on the right-click menu. You will see that this element is part of the Architect workset. Selecting the icon to make element editable will bring up the Place Request dialog box. The error cannot be ignored, and the dialog box is telling us that the element belongs to another user and must be resaved and relinquished to allow us to get control. However, we can place a request that will notify the other user that we wish to borrow this element and make some changes. To do this, simply place the request, and this will automatically notify the other user that we intend to work on this element. Once the request has been granted, we can then borrow the element and begin modifications, selecting the Close panel to complete the process. It's important to note that closing the Editing Request dialog box does not cancel the request. You can check the status of any of your requests for borrowing elements on the status bar at the bottom of the screen. Selecting the Editing Request button will then show what requests have been made for that particular element. Once the request has been granted, we can then begin work and modify the model. Once we make all the required changes, we can then synchronize with Central to release the element back and save the changes back to BIM360. Acting as the student who has now received the requests, I can go to Collaborate and select the Editing Request button. Here I can select the request and then choose to grant it or deny or retract. In this instance, I'm going to grant access to the request. The request has now been granted, and the student will get a notification saying the request has been granted. We can also use the work sharing display options within Revit to color code and control the model. On the Revit status bar, we have an option for work sharing display. Left clicking this option will show the work sharing display settings. Selecting the top option for work sharing display settings, we can go in and configure the color coding that will be used for the different displays. First of all, we can control the checkout status colors when it's checked out by myself or other members. We can control the different owners, model updates, and the work sets. Simply selecting Apply and OK will confirm these colors, and now we can change the different work share display options. Again, selecting the menu with a left click, we can go to Checkout Status. You will now see the model updates its color display to show what objects have been checked out. We can also change this to Owners, Model Updates if applicable, and finally Work Sets. As we are working on a work shared model, it will also be a requirement to relinquish control of the elements. We can do this by selecting the Collaborate tab and choosing the Relinquish All Mine. This will release ownership of any work sets or any borrowed elements that have not been changed. We use this tool if we have checked out work sets and borrowed elements but then decided not to publish the changes. To do this, simply select Relinquish All Mine, and this will relinquish all the ownership of any work sets or any borrowed elements we have not changed. We can then synchronize with Central and update this back in BIM360.